So how do you honor toxic parents? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Untoxifying your parental relationship. Go ahead and cue my theme music. Welcome to Untoxify Your Relationship. Here we will talk about all things healthy and how to get that toxic mess out of you and your partnership. I'm your host, Melissa Webb, a practicing licensed mental health therapist with 10 years experience. All right, let's go ahead and hop into it. What's up, everybody? So before I hop into the topic of today, I just want to let y'all know that my company, Purposeful Counseling, we are hosting a paint and sip. We're calling it Canvas and Cocktails, a luxury paint and sip experience. So it will be held in St. Louis, Missouri. And if you don't live in St. Louis, you can go ahead and get a virtual ticket where you will see live. You will get a paint kit, and you also get live instruction from our paint instructor named Brittany. It's going to be a dope event, so I hope y'all can make it. I will definitely link it in the show notes. If you are interested, go ahead, go to the landing page and find out all about the things that you get in this paint and sip experience. Now that we got that out the way, let's talk about parents. So I am a millennial, and my parent, because I only have one, my father passed away 10 years ago, and my parent is getting old, right? And when our parents get old, they get a little needy, and they're stuck in their ways, and they do the things that we're like, whoa, that's a little toxic there, like, calm down, right? My other friends who are also millennials, we're all seeing the same thing with our parents and how they are stuck in their ways. And again, they're doing some toxic things, and we have to put in boundaries and just say, hey, I don't like it when you do this, because we almost 40, y'all, and we ain't got time, right? We really do not have time. I also know there are people out there who just don't talk to their parents, right? Because of some things that have happened, whether they were abusive or toxic or whatever the case may be. You might not even have a relationship with your parent. You might not even talk to them. So today, that's what we're going to talk about today. That no matter your situation with your parent, you still have to honor them. This is not a blind obedience or accepting that the abuse was right or what they did to you was the right thing. No, it's not that. It's about recognizing their role while setting boundaries that protect your well-being. So we're going to look at the verse, one of the 10 commandments, the fifth one, honor your mother and your father. And I think a lot of times people see that verse and they're just like, why would I honor someone who is mean and disrespectful and things of that nature? And we're going to talk about why honoring your parents looks different than what we actually think honoring our parents is. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. So the fifth commandment, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth commandment is honor your father and your mother. This is in Exodus 20 and the 12th verse. The word honor there in Hebrew, and I'm about to butcher this because I can barely speak English, so y'all know I can't speak Hebrew. So the word is kaved, or kaved. Somebody check me on that. But it means glory or weight or significance. So that means like valuing or treating with importance. So when it comes to honoring our parents, it's really recognizing parents' significance through respect, gratitude, or setting boundaries and wisdom. So like I said before, this verse is not about blind or obedience or tolerating harm. It's really about just recognizing that your parents are your parents, right? And it's also like, how can I honor them by also protecting my well-being and protecting my peace and protecting my joy and happiness? Because you can still honor somebody and not be in relationship with them. And I think that's what this verse is saying. You can honor them. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a relationship. Honoring just means like, I recognize who you are. That's cool. And I don't have to talk to you. One character in the Bible, this is that we see this with, is David. David still honors Saul, even though Saul was trying to kill him, right? At one point, David found Saul in the cave. It was him and his homie Abishai, which is his nephew. Abishai was like, yo, can I take him out? And he was like, nah, I honor who he is. I honor where God put him in as the king of Israel, and we're not going to kill him. That was David. David had an opportunity to kill Saul, and David didn't take it. Why? Because he honored Saul's position as king, and he also honored God, the one who put him there. And but what David did, he did keep his distance, because if he got close to Saul, Saul would have killed him, right? So it's a thing of keeping your distance and still honoring the position that they're in. David honored Saul as king. He just said, I got to put some boundaries in place, or you are going to kill me. And I think that's what it has to be when it comes to our parents. Even though they may be toxic and all this stuff, so you can honor them like, you my parent, but because you're toxic and you're trying to kill me, I have to remove myself in order to keep my peace, in order to stay alive. Because I think that's a thing where a lot of times we like, oh, because they're mean and they're evil, I could be mean and evil to them. That's dishonoring whoever that person is and their position in your life. But when you honor them and recognize their position, but then also recognizing that I can't stay here and I can't be close to you, that's a different type of honoring, right? So that we're going to talk about what does that look like, because I know a lot of times people like, wait, Melissa, you're messing up my whole thought process right now. And I get that. I understand. So we're going to talk about what does honoring look like. First thing is acknowledging their role. Like I said before, you can acknowledge that they are your role as a parent, but this doesn't mean that you excuse their actions. What I always tell people, especially when I'm working with people who have had toxic parents in their lives and they're trying to, really have a healthy relationship with a toxic parent, I always tell them, do not label them as a good parent or a bad parent, because that would keep you stuck. And also, all our definitions of a good parent and a bad parent are different. I tell people all the time, parenting does not come with a manual. Because if I had a manual, baby, if everybody had a manual, we'll be all raising our kids the same. And I just don't think that's the case, right? Because it's not. And so once you label a parent good, once you label a parent bad, once you start comparing parents, right? Like, she had a good parent and my parent can be like that parent, you start to keep yourself stuck. Just like I talked about comparison in a couple of episodes ago, comparison is a thief of joy, right? It's also a thief of love, because once you start comparing people, it's really hard for you to keep your joy, because now you're like, oh, why can't I have that? Then you start coveting, right? And that's a sin. And so what we want to do is just acknowledge, like, that's your parent. That's just who they were. They weren't good. They weren't bad. They were just a parent. And once you become a parent, this becomes real. But just recognize, like, they're just a parent. They had sex. They had me, and they became a parent. That's it. That's all. Another thing I tell people, if they're having a hard time even wrapping their head around separating good, bad, and just mom, I just say, well, call them by their first name. If their name is Tammy, they're like, all right, Tammy. She just so happened to be my mom, and she just so happened to parent me when I was younger, right? So separating some things to help you to just understand, like, this is just a person who literally had you, and they are your parent. And I think separating it from good and bad will also help you to understand, like, that's just who they are. They're just a parent. Let's just leave it at that. Don't add their actions to how they're parenting. They are just a parent. And leave the other stuff to the side. I'm going to get to the other stuff. The second way honoring looks like is gratitude. You can thank your parent for the good things they done in your life. So that can look like if your parent was a coach and they coached the sport that you played. So like my dad, he was my softball coach, yelled at me all day, but I was a good player. And so I was lazy, but I was a good player. But I see, like, my brother, he coaches his son's basketball team, and all he do is yell. I'm like, him and my daddy, they the same person. All he do is yell at the team. But that can be a good experience, right? Or even like if you had like mother-daughter night, or father-son nights, or your parent taking you to the mall and y'all shopping for prom or wedding dress shopping, or whatever the case may be. Whatever that good is, you can thank them for any good that they had in your life, right? You even if you have a toxic parent, you don't talk to them no more, but your life is great and you're thankful for your life. You can thank your parent for having you, right? Because they could have had an abortion. So find some type of gratitude in your parental relationship. You can also learn from what they did wrong. In other words, you can break generational curses. So if you do have a parent that talks down to you or they don't acknowledge your feelings and they're dismissive or they're manipulative, when you become a parent, it's like, oh yeah, I'm definitely not doing that. You are the generational curse breaker, there we go, in your family, because now you're teaching your children how to not respond or how to have healthy relationships with others, because now you recognize like that is toxic and I don't want to do that to my kids and have them in a therapy chair when they're 25 talking about, I don't know, my parents are crazy, right? So now you become the generational curse breaker. This means you're choosing a different path. You're choosing a different path of how to parent, which changes the trajectory of generations, because when your child gets older, they will know how to treat their children, and it just goes from there. So you are not keeping the same toxic mess going, you are ending it. So shout out to you for being a generational curse breaker. Another way you can honor your parents is by care. When I say care, I mean like aging parent care. Or even if they get in the hospital or something like that. So supporting your aging parent, or if they're in the hospital or if they're in a nursing home, that's supporting them in that way. I want to be very clear. Support them with healthy boundaries and know your capacity, because what I see, especially with Black families, is that if a parent is aging, they feel like they have to go above and beyond to help this parent, even though it's not in their capacity. I let my mama know. I let her know. Matter of fact, this was the other day. I let her know. I said, Mama, if you ever get sick or you get dementia or something like that, I said, I'm not going to be over here looking at you every day and taking care of you. I will hire someone to do it, and they will take care of you, or we're going to figure out how we can put you in a home. I said, because I don't have the capacity to deal with you like that. I know that for me. I know I don't have the capacity. And my mom's like, dang, that's messed up. You're just going to put me in a home? Absolutely. Because I know my capacity. I would be over here for a minute and be like, nah, I'm good. And I will leave. I'm just being honest. And I think you have to really be honest with yourself and really figure out, like, what is my capacity when it comes to my aging parent? What do I have to deal with? Because I have a son, right? Prayerfully, I get married. And if I'm married, I have a whole family. I don't have time to be taking care of an aging parent. Now, my brother, on the other hand, I don't know what his life is. I don't know what his wife want to do. That's on them. But I let them know. I would be there financially. That's how I would contribute. I'm not going to be here physically, and I will try to help out as emotionally as I can. But financially, I got y'all. And so it's just one of them things where I know my capacity. So ask yourself, what is your capacity if your parent were to get sick, or if your parent was to be hospitalized? Like, what does that look like for you? And don't go above and beyond and do all this extra stuff, because you gonna run yourself ragged. And when you do that, you're not going to be no good for anybody. So really take the time to think about your capacity and what that looks like. And the last thing you can do to honor your parents is reflect God's wisdom. So this can look a different types of ways. So you can pray for your parents and leave it in God's hands, because again, I know people who have toxic parents and they just like, Lord, I just pray for them and I just go about my business. Amen. Amen, somebody, right? Because at the end of the day, if they need to change, only God can do that hard work. Heart work, not hard work, but heart work. And it is hard work, right? Only God can do that. So say a prayer for them, leave it up to God, and keep it moving. Forgive them, but don't enable. This is like releasing resentment, all right? But that doesn't mean allowing harm to continue. So I think a lot of times people feel like forgiveness is, I'm accepting what they did. No, forgiveness is really letting go of resentment, letting go of the bitterness, letting go of that anger, just letting it go. Because when you hold on to it, you create a prison for yourself to live in, and everything they do gonna piss you off, and you're gonna be mad all the time. And when you just let it go, and when you accept them for who they are, right, that then it just doesn't matter. I remember my mom would do stuff and it would really make me mad until I had to like really sit down and be like, why does this make me mad? And I had to do some forgiveness. I had to forgive her for some things and also accept her for who she is, right? This is just who she is. And once I sat down with her and talked to her about it, and she was like, oh, I didn't even realize that was happening. We have a better relationship now with that situation. However, but if I would have never said nothing, just held on to that anger, I would be angry all the time, be mad all the time, just be like, oh, frustrated all the time. And who wants to be like that? So it's really about letting go of resentment, letting go of bitterness, and really accepting your parent for who they are. Have the conversation if you can with them, like, hey, when you do this, this makes me feel like this. And they might accept it, they might not. You have to be ready for whatever comes. And then pray for them. Leave it up to God. Ask God to help you to release that anger and bitterness and move on. Forgiveness is for you. It's not for them. Forgiveness is for you to move on with your life and not hold on to bitterness that can get in your heart, and definitely you start bearing bad fruit because of that bitterness. Reflecting God's wisdom also look like firm boundaries. I love talking about boundaries. I talked about it in the last episode. But boundaries is everything. If a parent is unsafe, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, limiting or even restricting contact is treating them with dignity, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to hurt yourself because they're hurting you, right? You can remove yourself at any time. You don't have to stay there. You can say like, hey, this is hurting me. I have to step away. Or mom or dad, you're toxic. I have to step away. And that is the boundary. The boundary is I'm stepping away. The boundary may be if they're being mean to your kids and like, hey, my child won't be coming over to your house anymore. Something my mom did, she would talk about my son's name. My son's name is Abishai. And she was like, well, I don't know how to say it. So I ain't going to call him nothing. Da, da, da. And she said all this stuff. And I just said, listen, if you don't know how to say my son's name, that means you don't need to watch him. So either you figure out how to say his name or you won't be watching him. She figured out how to say his name. And that was my boundary, right? That was my boundary, because at the end of the day, you're not going to disrespect my son. When you disrespect my son, you disrespect me, and I'm not the one to be disrespected. So, and people like, dang, that was mean. I was like, but that's my son though. And I think for the first time, I started standing up for my mom and really saying like, this is what I need from you, and if you can't provide the things that I need, then I have to put in a boundary. And I think that's really okay, because if you can do that with friends, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, your wife, your husband, right? Why can't you do that with your mom? Again, I think people think it's because they're a parent, you can't say anything. And sometimes you got to remove that title parent in order to be like, hey, Tammy, let me tell you, I don't like to be disrespected, and this is what I need. So sometimes you do have to take that parent hat off of your parent in order to recognize like this is a person. And at the end of the day, I want respect from people that's in my life. And it's okay to ask for respect from your parent. Point blank, period. So don't be afraid to ask for your needs if your needs can't be met. Because I even asked my mom, can you meet that? Because if you're not, then this is what's going to happen. So it's really like, can you meet my needs? And I'm giving you the opportunity to say, this is in my capacity or not. And if it's not, that's okay. Cool. I'm just letting you know how I'm going to move forward, because you can't meet the needs that I need in this moment. And then also choose righteousness and wisdom in your actions. You don't always have to be mean and nasty and petty and all the other stuff. Wisdom is just knowing when to speak, when not to speak, when to act, when not to act, and being Christ-like. It's okay to say like, hey, I don't like this. That is okay. It's not okay to cuss your parent out and say horrible, mean things and steal their money and do all this other stuff, right? Let's respect the parent, and respect can look different in different ways. So the last part of that fifth commandment is a blessing when it comes to honoring your parent. And that last part says that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. So what that means is the blessing in honoring parents equal long life on the earth. So there's a promise when it comes to honoring your parents. So honoring parents foster wisdom, discipline, and a strong moral foundation. It also goes to respecting God's order, which leads to peace and well-being, because when you respect God's order, it is peace, right? Because that is God's will. God's will is for the order to be obeyed. So once you obey the order, that leads to peace and well-being. This also goes to respecting authority or parents, which contributes to longevity and stability. It's also about having a life that is well lived. So if you had a difficult parent or you have difficult parents, choose to honor them with healthy boundaries, praying, and forgiveness. This aligns with God's design for blessing. And blessing is just not things. Blessing in the Hebrew literally means joy, happiness, fruitfulness, right? And this leads to peace. So if you have the blessing of God by honoring your parents, this leads to peace, this leads to joy, this leads to happiness. I think that's why, for me, boundaries is such a huge thing, because boundary leads to peace, it leads to happiness, it leads to joy. And again, you don't have to honor your parents. Honoring your parents doesn't mean I accept what they did to me, which was bad, and, I have to have blind obedience to them. No, honoring can look a lot of different ways, as we see. And just make sure you pick the one that's right for your situation. And I believe God will honor that. Also pray and ask God, like, how do I honor my parents? What does that look like? He will tell you, because God is so gracious. And he's like, now you're asking the right questions. How do you honor your parents? Say less. I got you. I will tell you. So just make sure that you are honoring your parents. Ask God what that looks like, and go forth and be great, because we want you to have a long-lived life and a long, blessed life, because you chose to honor your parents. All right, that's it. That's the post. I hope this made sense. Again, pray, ask God to help you with all of this. Thanks for listening. Tell your auntie, uncle, and cousin about the show. Episodes drop every Monday. I'm trying to get better with dropping episodes earlier in the day, but the way my life been set up, I've been recording on Mondays and dropping them on Mondays. Shout out to my listeners. Hey, listeners from all over the world. I wholeheartedly appreciate you all listening and really tuning in. Again, drop a review, drop some stars. Let me know how I am doing. Stay classy, stay non-toxic, and I will see y'all next time. Peace. Thank you for listening. Go ahead and share this episode with your family and friends. Thank you, and see you next time.